From the savannah to the Midland and the Atlantic, Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. Ambazonia rise.
Dear Ambazonians on the home front and diaspora.
Dear Ambazonia freedom fighters in the home front and in the diaspora.
The Ethics Commission of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia is coming out to alert you that it is becoming more and more evident that the former British Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonians, will soon emerge as the newest nation in the world.
We are calling on all of us to start preparing to receive Ambazonia as parents prepare to receive their firstborn child. Malcolm X said, tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. We are already very educated, talented, and very rich in natural resources. Do all this guarantee a safe and prosperous Ambazonia? The answer is an emphatic no. Theodore Roosevelt said, to educate a person in the mind but not in morals is to educate a menace in society.
Ambazonians, it is time to start planning to restore our cultural and social values that characterize us as a people of good repute. Before our Republic to Cameroon invasion, we were respectful of each other, of the law, and of our culture. We earned our living through honest hard work, making clean money for ourselves.
Our values helped us to maximize the benefits of our natural resources as well as our human resources. Southern Cameroons were serene and clean, simply beautiful in spirit and in the physical. We all long for such a place to call home, and we can make it happen by God's grace.
Our local government areas and counties, are you preparing? Do you have an ethics commission in your local government areas, counties to serve as a moral compass for you? Do you have a copy of the Ambazonia Ethics Code and the Constitution?
All arms of government, do you have an ethics agency? Departments of DSS, HSS, Communications and IT, Education, DHACM, DFA and DEINR. Do you have ethics agency to serve as a moral compass for your departments?
Ambazonians, you need to know your rights by reading the Ethics Code and the Constitution.
Shame unethical behavior and reward good behavior in your communities. Hold leaders accountable. Be the watchdog of your communities and governments. See something, say something.
The church, you are the main research center of moral principles with the responsibility of moralizing the society. How effective are you outside the church building?
Maya Angelou said, when you know better, then you do better. Ambazonians, watch ethics for an emerging Ambazonia every Friday at 4 p.m. Amba time.
Exclusively on ABC Amba TV. Stay tuned.
hands in the air, everybody hands in the air, hands in the air. Let's go there. All the champions hands in the air, everybody hands in the air, hands in the air. We are champions. We are champions. We are champions. We are champions. Champions say hallelujah. 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 Over and over again we see the touch of your greatness, Lord, in us. Whoa. Come join me, sing now. Let's celebrate together. Come join me, praise now. Let's jubilate together. All the champions and in the area, everybody and in the area, and in the area. Let's go there. All the champions and in the area, everybody and in the area, and in the area. We are champions. We are champions. We are champions. We are champions. Champions say hallelujah. 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 You've always been a winner. You are the best. You one of a kind of challenges can contest.
We want to start by assuring all Ambazonians that your money is in safe hands, that no penny leaves the National Treasury unaccounted for. We want to talk about aid. What is aid? The EDNA, Ambazonia Independence Deal. So we replaced aid. Remember when the coup plotters took CID, our payment platforms? We wanted to come up with something that was very different so we don't get confused with them and us. So that's how we came with that word aid. As you've heard our president say, it does not matter what part of government you serve, local, county, or central government, you should be able to pay aid. Paying taxes to your country is compulsory. It's not negotiable. Whether you're in this government or you're not in this government. The brothers and sisters at home are paying for this with their blood. Our mothers are paying for it with ghost town days. What actually are we giving up? You all know that the world has turned its back on us, and we will rely on nobody else but ourselves. I want us to search our consciences and ask, are we doing enough? Are we actually here to support Ambazonia? Are we actually doing our all to make sure our country is free? Our goal is to make sure by the end of the year, or mid-year at least, we have had 1,000 people paying aid. Can you imagine, Mr. President, the person who carries this revolution on his shoulders, he pays $100 every month. We must also lead by example. So for all of you members of government, from cabinet to local government, who have subscribed on aid, we say thank you. Thank you so much. I hear some people say, oh, let's increase firepower on the home front. Increasing firepower on home front means we need more funds in the coffers. We see the war flowing to Ukraine, but no one is coming to our aid. It's up to us to say, yes, we can do this, with or without anyone. It's up to us to say we can become Somaliland tomorrow. Whether anyone recognizes us or not, we recognize ourselves as Ambazonians. And it only starts with our pocketbooks. It starts with all of us looking deep inside us. Remember this money is not going to Iringwa, it's not going to the president, it's going to those that are suffering in refugee camps. If you are out of home, for all of us in the diaspora, there is an opportunity to contribute to fund this government. If there is a will, there is a way. So I'm leaving you with one quote from J.F. Kennedy. He said, and I quote, Don't ask what your country has done for you, but ask, what can I do for you? So fellow brothers and sisters, fellow Ambazonians, don't ask what Ambazonia will do for you tomorrow. Don't ask what has Ambazonia done for me, but ask what can I do for Ambazonia? How can I make this journey to be shorter so we can get home faster? It takes money. It takes our collective effort. It takes all of us to put our hands in our pockets, go deeper to say, I'm doing this for the freedom of my country. Remember this, those that are on home front, some of them have given their blood. We have mothers that have lost 3 children. We have mothers that don't have hope. We are their hope. Like President Obama said, hope that we believe in. So I hope today we look at ourselves. For those of you who have not paid it, if you have any questions, please, we have a fantastic team. We have Director Padi, we have Chairman Amos, we have SG Peter, we have myself, we have Ma Victoria Yangi, and we are so proud to bring Comrade Abono on our team again. That way, our brother Chiclot, who was a very, very major partner in this program, is not here. But Comrade Abono will be coming in from the National Treasury to pull numbers on a daily basis, because we will be looking on these numbers on a daily basis. Thank you all again so much, and may God continue to strengthen us and change our mind from takers to givers. Long live.
From the savannah to the Midland and the Atlantic, Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. Ambazonia rise.
Dear Ambazonians on the home front and diaspora,
Dear Ambazonia freedom fighters in the home
Hello.
From the savannah to the Midland and the Atlantic, Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. Ambazonia rise.
Dear Ambazonians on the home front and diaspora,
Dear Ambazonia freedom fighters in the home front and in the diaspora,
the Ethics Commission of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia is coming out to alert you that it is becoming more and more evident that the former British Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonians, will soon emerge as the newest nation in the world.
we are calling on all of us to start preparing to receive Ambazonia as parents prepare to receive.
You're all welcome to the Ambazonia Ethics Commission. Once more, we are here and we think you will learn a lot. Again, as a reminder, we have said this before many times, that the Ethics Commission is the moral compass of our society. And because it is the moral compass of our society, the ethics has adopted a very common, simple saying. See something, say something. You see it in the dark room, in your bedroom. If you don't say it, it will come to the parlor. And if you don't do something, it will come to the streets. That's why this principle, see something, say something. Today we are addressing essentially land grabbing in Ambazonia. Because the moral compass of the society, it is becoming so common. But the moral compass of this government, we have to address it, hoping that in future, when we successfully establish ourselves in Mboya, the guidelines we give now will help us, if not prevent future, at least find a solution to the problems that have brought it here. That's all. I hope we all learn from our contributions. And so over to you, Barrister So, who will address the issue of land grabbing. Thanks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Barrister Mbesa. Thank you for inviting me to the Ethics Commission. We know that before the so-called joining of 1961, the Southern Cameroons was regulated, land was regulated in the Southern Cameroons by the British law on land and land acquisition. And all lands at that time belonged to the Queen or to the monarchy of the British Empire. And individuals, private people, private companies acquired land and they were given what you call certificate of occupancy. Even though the land belonged to all land belonged to the Queen, we had what we call native lands that belonged to the various villages and settlements and around the British Empire, particularly in Africa. Now, families own land by possession. The families who have possessed land for several years could just walk to the lands office and obtain what they call certificate of occupancy. No complications, just verification to ensure that that land belongs to that particular family. But when La Republique took over our territory, invaded our territory in 1968, they enacted what you call the Land Tenures Act. That Land Tenures Act, I will be giving you the general principles because my library is not here, I am on exile, and I don't have the text in my hands. But I will be giving to this commission the general principles of that particular law. In that law of La République du Cameroun, I think it was enacted in 1968, there are two types of lands in Cameroon: the national lands and the state lands. I'll start with the state land. The state lands are lands that belong to the government, and they have what they call, it's no longer certificate of occupancy. They change all certificate of occupancies to what you call land title. So the state lands belong to the government. The government of La République du Cameroun goes around, including our territory, and takes land and claims it and says this is government land and gives title to itself. That is the state land. And they can also sell or convey those state lands to individuals through the senior divisional officers or sub-divisional officers of the place where the land is located. That is state lands. The national lands are the lands that belong to the natives, that belongs to that are untitled and belong to the natives, belong to all the various settlements, But they call it the national lands because it belongs to the government. So if you want to have title to the national lands, you will have to go through a commission set up in the subdivisional office. And that commission is so made up in such a way that there is no way you can obtain a land title in Ambazonia or anywhere in La Republic of Cameroon without going to that commission, giving them their sitting fee, bribing. We know all the methods they use for you to obtain a land title, and it's a very difficult road to walk. First, you go to the commission. First you apply. Your name, the particular name, your name and the place of the land is gazetted and published in the divisional office. You go there and see it. They will tell you what you need to bring as documentation. You have to now start preparing documentation from one documentation to the other. That is in the law. And you appear before the commission. You appear before that commission, and they will take you down to the land where you are asking for it to be titled in your name. The day that commission is coming down, again, you have to do put a lot of money aside and a lot of food and drinks aside. But even though that is not in the law, but that is the practice. They will come and sit there, look at the land, question their neighbors, question this, and plant what they call pillars and number them. That is just the beginning. Now, all documentation is sent now to the Lands and Survey of La Republique du Cameroun. God, that is where you will walk the walk. Go up and down, go up and down. I don't know. I'm talking like this. I started a land title process on my lands in Mancon, and I tell you, up to now, the documents are still there, almost 10 years after. We are here to talk about land grabbing. Land grabbing is in two forms. First, let me address land grabbing as it concerns the national lands. La Republique de Cameroon citizens that are working either in government or are businessmen who have settled in Ambazonia have taken upon themselves to grab land belonging to the natives without adequate compensation and without even consulting them, and immatriculating these lands in their name. The case of Okala Bilai is a very popular case in the southern zone, particularly in Fako, and particularly Victoria, where he has a lot of land in his name that he never bought from anybody. And not only that, when CDC first came, of course, CDC was mostly in the southern zone. The natives ceded land to CDC, and it was then called the Cameroon, the Commonwealth Development Corporation when it started, and it belonged to the British government, the British Commonwealth. And they acquired land by negotiating with the natives, the Bakweri natives, the Bafo natives, or whatever native they found, in the southern zone. And when CDC is done with these lands, they retrocede these lands back to the natives. Instead of these La Republique administrators allowing the natives that previously owned this land to enjoy their land, to resettle in those lands, because those lands belong to them originally. What do these administrators do? They come there, they cut pieces of land there for themselves and for their relatives, all francophones, for their relatives, for everybody, and they share these lands among themselves, and they go to the lands office. The commission is managed by them, so they go. It passes through the commission like a letter in the post office. They go to this lands and survey, and they matriculate all these lands to themselves. The most popular places where they have grabbed land, I will come to that. That is what they call private lands. Lands owned by the natives, but in very specific and very well-placed places like the GRAs and the lands near the CDC plantation installations, which are very highly solicited. That is what they grab. They grab all that land without negotiating with the family. They just use the power of the government and take those lands and matriculate those lands in their names. The case of this Finney Hotel man in Victoria, he will have to tell us how he acquired all the land that he has built those hotels on. He will have to tell us the origin, the original owners, we will find out whether the original owners gave them those lands. That is first the national lands. And that is where our people are suffering, not only in Victoria, in Kumba, in Bamenda Station, Kumba Station, in Mountain Station, anywhere that you have stations. These trucks, these Cameroon citizens have now owned land that they never negotiated or bought from anybody, and immatriculated those lands in their names. Another way that they grab land is the land that they call state lands, which I said before belong to the government and matriculated to the government. How did the government acquire them? When La Republique invaded our territory and took over our government, they took over all the lands that had government buildings on them. And that's not all. They also took over land that were owned by private companies like the Barclays Bank and all the other private firms that acquired that land through certificate of occupancy. They took it over and claimed that they're all government lands. And then they use those lands that have not been caught, that are still vacant, and take it for themselves. Government workers, government civilians, the Jews, the important people, the delegates of Francophone origin, they take it to themselves, immatriculate it in their name, and that, for you to acquire state land, you have to go to the senior divisional officer and start. That is not a problem for them because senior divisional officer is part of them. He too grabs his own. So anybody who comes, who is a Francophone, who is a delegate or some big government official, it passes like a letter in the post office, and he has land title on state land, claiming that the state sold that land to him. That is one area that we'll be looking at to find out who sold you this land. How did you acquire this land? All lands owned by foreigners in Ambazonia will be investigated when we get to Buea, will be investigated before we hand it over to you through a process that will be laid down by a law that we will pass in our parliament regulating lands and land acquisition in Ambazonia. In a nutshell, that is the tenet of that law that La Republique manages now, and the way they do it. If you are a private individual and you have a piece of land from your ancestors, to get the land title, it's a very difficult process because you spend a lot of money, and in the end, well, if you are lucky, you get. Some people get. After spending, well, through bribery, you get. But when we get to Buea, one of the important laws that will be passed by our parliament will be the Land Tenure Act, or the land law of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. For now, we consider that any foreigner who owns land in the Ambazonia, we will have to find out how you acquire that land, because all the lands that have been owned by these people have been grabbed from our people. A lot of the land that there's a lot of land grabbing is land that CDC has left and it has gone back to the natives. Instead of the government facilitating for the natives to take their land, they first of all grab some for themselves and leave whatever they have to leave. I think Barrister Mbesa is a lawyer too. He may have a little bit to add on what I've just said.
Thanks. Thank you
That
very
is
much.
generally what you call the Land Tenures Act of the Federal of La Republique du Cameroon. It started. They have amended it several times, making it more difficult to acquire land. From 1968, it was under the Federal Republic of Cameroon, then left and went to under the United Republic of Cameroon. It was amended, and the La Republique of Cameroon came, and it was further amended. So that is the law, the land law that exists as we speak. Over to you.
Thank you
Mr.
very
President.
much, Mr. Fru. Thank you. Good evening, fellow Ambazonians.
Barrister Mbesa would have to add if I left
Okay.
out something.
Yes. Barrister Mbesa,
So that's
please.
generally what that law represents.
Thank you
Again,
very much,
two
Barrister
types of
Fru.
lands: state lands and national lands.
Thanks a lot. Hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, fellow Ambazonians. Tom Dula, the Vice Chair of Ethics Commission. Sorry for my lateness. I feel very humbled, sitting in between two heavyweights of our revolution, Barrister Fru Johnson and Barrister Tim Mbesa. Today's topic very, very important for us. I don't have to get much into that again, but what we have heard, everything concerning land ownership in Ambazonia, perpetrated by La Republique, is very, very unethical, and of course that will be changed when we get home to Ambazonia. So, Barrister Mbesa, please add something to add.
Yes, I have quite a lot to add. You see, the topic for today is land grabbing. And it is important for us to know that land grabbing can take two forms. And in fact, it takes two forms. What we're addressing now is the administrative land grab. Before we get to that, let me remind ourselves that we have the local land graft. That is what causes all this conflict between communities, villages, the Bororos, the Fulanis, the farmers. They are fighting over land. Somebody is trying to grab another man's land. While we deal with administrative land grabbing for the future, the local land graft. Are you getting me?
Yes.
We are getting you 5 on 5.
Yeah, the local land grab, we can deal with it right now, even at the LGA level. Because there's no reason, I had time to say this before. Why are these Bororo people fighting with the other people of the South? They want grazing land. They want to graze cows. We're past the age of somebody grazing 50 cows over 50 acres of land. That can be monetized even without going to Yaoundé, even without going to Buya. But our local people, you can make a small fence, just a back wire. The cow will not cross the back wire. And that will limit the cow to your own area given to you. But that cow will want to go out because they need more grass. You can grow modern grass. Those of us who live in the Western world, we see these farmers rear cows, rear pigs, produce milk in tons on a specific, very short, small area of land. They plant grass, they feed those things. Today we still go to the markets in Bamanda and Kumba everywhere and buy chicken eggs that are not local. They produce those eggs in thousands in poultry farms. So we can address those things right at our own level now to stop others. In order to prevent further fighting between villages, right now that we speak, we can still prevent that. If you have not started fighting with your neighbor, you can make a modern boundary, but where you people are not disagreeing. This is the boundary here that will prevent you or him from crossing to your own to grab it. That's what it is. But let me go back to what the topic is. The topic today is land grabbing, and we're focusing, my focus has been directed to be on the CDC lands. Why the CDC lands? Before I get there, let me just say this. What the law of Barisanso is saying is not actually 68, it's law ordinance number 74-1 of 6 July 1974. It's a presidential ordinance that purported to define land and to show how it can be managed. It is still in force today. For the purposes of this discussion, what is important in that ordinance, as far as the CDC is concerned, is Article 2. It describes what is private land, and among this of private land is written the Grundbuch. That's 2E or D. The Grundbuch, the bunch is a register of lands. In Germany, the German of 1800. And how did it come to enter into our own records? This takes us to the issue. Now, we are dealing with the CDC, because if there's land grab, administrative land grab in Cameroon, and in fact in West Africa, the headquarters of the administrative land grab is in Fako. The headquarters of administrative land grab is in Fako. And why is it the headquarters? Why is it Fako? It is based on the CDC. Why do we deal with the CDC in particular, the land grab of the CDC? Why do we have to deal with it particularly? It is because that case of the land grab of the CDC has gone international. It has been handled by the UN Human Rights Commission. It has been handled by the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The case was filed in 2002. So the additions pending there. But why all that thing? Let me go back to the church history. As Barisanso says, when the white man arrived, the coastal areas, that's where they landed because they came by ship. As far as Ambazonia is concerned, they landed in Victoria, in Lash, and settled in Buya. Why? We all know the volcanic nature of the land. The German arrivals, they were mostly farmers. And so because the land was so fertile, they started farming there. They got land. Maybe they forced it out, but the Bakwe people gave them the land. They didn't buy it. They took different parcels of land. And in order to secure their parcels of land, they went and registered it in Germany because they came from Germany. That's why you have the Grundbuch register. So those were their private farms. And when the war came in and ended in 1945, the Germans had left. What were they going to do with these lands on which the Germans were farming? They had registered them as their private lands. Right or wrong, they have registered them. And so the administration, the UK, decided that, as Brasanso says, let us form a common farm and develop these lands for the common good of the people. That was 1947. And so they established, effective 1948, the CDC, the Commonwealth Development Corporation, call it today the CDC, the Commonwealth Development Corporation, which sole purpose was to develop the lands for the good of the people, of the community, not the even expressed there, right there in that document, that 60 years after, the lands will return to the Bakweri people. As a side note, I would like to say in passing that the Bakweri people, our coastal inhabitants, were one of the most acceptable people in the world. They did not give lands only to the Germans. They gave a lot of lands to the Christians who arrived there. You hear about Seca Baptist, you hear about the Catholic Mission and so on. They took those lands, they didn't buy. They just gave them to establish churches and schools for the community. Today, you don't have any litigation going on between the Bakweris and the Presbyterian Church and the Baptist Church and the Catholic Church. No. As long as those churches, those schools have been used to save the population, the Bakweris have no problem with it. The first church, Catholic Church, I'm a Catholic, that was built in the whole area there, was built in 1897 in Bojongo. It is still standing there. There are lots and lots of parcels of land there that they were just given to them. They have opened schools. They have even opened farms right there. You see Sase, they're all given to them. They have not heard any quarrel there. So, but why is there this land grab and a quarrel over the CDC land? When they created the CDC, I said the aim was to save the people. In 1974, Mr. Ahijo, in classifying the lands, whatever category, they excluded those lands that was given by the Aquarians from being government lands. They were private land. In Ordinance number 74-1, Article 2, they were private. But where did things go wrong? 20 years into that, 1994, Mr. Bobia takes a decree to say that they are privatizing many companies, including the CDC. So if you privatize it, if you bought one of these farms, it's no longer going to be used for the people. It's going to be your property. It becomes your property. You can farm there. You can build your houses there. It ceases to serve the purpose for which the Bakwerians gave the land. And that was the beginning of the case that became international. The Bakweris constituted themselves into what they call the BLC, the Bakweri Land Commission, and took them to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, to the Cameroon government. They had some rulings there. They went further, 2002, took them to the African Commission on Human Rights and sued them there. In Communication 260-02-002, that was even a year before Communication 266. And they won almost everything there, but the commission did not continue. The commission said, look, you have established your case, but we cannot hear this case because you did not exhaust the local remedies in the Cameroon. But they had availed it. They had wanted the government of Cameroon to compensate, not necessarily cash, to do something to compensate the Bakwerians. Which the government of Cameroon, they agree, yeah, that is your land, but they wanted to manage it their own way. And once the commission said, look, we cannot continue because they did not exhaust the local remedies, the government of Yaoundé made the sign of the cross, thank you. We've won. We're going to manage this thing in our own way. And that is exactly where the land grab has started. Instead of doing it the Bakweri Land Commission way, today, as we speak, they purport now to surrender land to the Bakwerians. All of us are familiar with something in Cameroon called chef de terre. The sous-prefet, he is the chef de terre. He commands not just the land, he commands the chiefs, he creates them. And so today, in Victoria, in particular, in Boya, Tico, these are three areas that are very important. Where the CDC lands has surrounded the area, they would create chiefs of their own and say, okay, Chief A, we've created you a chief, signed by the sous-prefet or the DO. And then we're giving you 20 acres of land, surrounded from the CDC. Behind, on condition that, this guy who is being created a chief has no followers. So we'll give you 20 acres of land, we'll take 5, we'll take 10. That's where the governors and the prefects have benefited by grabbing all the land for themselves. That's the pinnacle of land grab in Ambazonia. That's the pinnacle of land grab in West Africa. I don't know any other place that has been like that, if not in the world. So that's why I say the headquarters of land grab is in Ambazonia. It is basically in Fako. And so, not just in Fako, in Buea, in Victoria, and in Tico. Because the Bakwere people, the Land Commission, led by late Moland Joli Tumbe, unfortunately he died, did not succeed in making the African Commission on Human Rights to impose a ruling. They have not taken it yet to Moyoka. The CDC, very land that we are talking, are found in Moyoka, in Mwenja, in Matheti, in Poyo, in Mondone. But Mwenja, Moyoka are essentially Balong. They are not Bakwarians, they are Balong. But that's not all. The land value in Fako, in Moyoka, is not the same like the land value in Buea, or in Tico, or in Victoria. A piece of land there is worth 10 times what you might probably find in Moyoka. And so these people have become so sensitive to it, they grab the land. And I may use this to say, in the late 70s, there was a Speaker of the National Assembly called Musa Yaya Safiraki. When they discovered oil in Victoria, in that West Coast, other West Coast were CDC plantations. Musa Yaya Safaraki came to Victoria, acquired acres upon acres of land around where the refinery is built. Registered in his name, he died. His children or his descendants have sold the land for themselves. That is a clear example of land grab. This Awusa man, this Ghana man from Garawa, how did he come to be owning land with title in Victoria, in Eden now, in the West Coast? That is fraud of unimaginable proportions anywhere in the world. And so that's the essence of land grab. Ratanso has elucidated on so many. Besides that, you see, you can go to Bamenda, you can go to Kumba, you can go to Nkambe. The British administration, the administration that we had, all the land that we have, there was nothing called government land. This land belonged to people. This farm, the governor's office is standing on somebody's farm. The hospital is standing in somebody's fence. So when the government creates those things, they take the land, it becomes government land because they have put utilities there for the public use. But they did not just end there. They had reserved land, hoping that in future the administration would expand. There will be more houses, there will be more offices. So they had what they call reserved land for the government. That's where they have now grabbed it all out. They come and say, oh, there was 10 acres of land up station for future government offices. They come there, a governor come there, or a prefect come there, he passes it out and sells it as plots and takes the money and go away. In the upstation Bamenda there, I'm sure I've heard, lots of those plots were sold to Bamileke people, Mbunda people. They put up story buildings there. They're sitting there because their countryman happened to have been a Dio. He grabbed the national land that was reserved for the state development, put up, sold it out, took money, and we whatever thing he wanted there. And so this has replicated itself throughout all the regions, all the units of Amazonia, but not with the same capacity. Because a piece of land, if you did that, for example, in Kambe, maybe you find Kambe people come and buy, or Wum people come and buy. It's not going to be the same like doing it in upstation in Bamenda. Because a plot of land in upstation in Bamenda is worth 20 times the price of the same plot of land, similar plot of land in Bangui. owned up. And so that is the pinnacle of the land grab. That has been the history of the CDC land. And that has been the reason why this land grab has focused so much on the CDC. I happen to have lived in Boya. When they started creating those things, if you go to Boya, if you know Boya very, very well, there's the area they call Bomaka. Bomaka, these were all CDC farms. They created chiefs there. Among them, one of the chiefs that was my friend, I did his case, he was in prison. They created him as the chief, gave him so much land. I bought some from him. And so, they have sold this thing. Was that the intention of the Barkwere Land Commission looking for compensation? I'm not sure that was the intention. Because if you gave the land to individual chiefs, call them chiefs, fabricated or made, they will sell the land out to you or to me. I will put a story building there. I will put a hotel there. And you will take 20 million and put in your back. But what happens to your children? What happens to your children? The Barkwere children who will be born 20 years, 50 years after. What do they get out of it? Zero. So I'm sure the Barkwere Land Commission, their own claim was based on different principles. They wanted some preservation for the people. For example, like those of us who live in the United States, who have Native Americans protection under the federal law. The children can go to school. All the lands that are Native Americans, the children can go to school with scholarships forever. They can go and take medical care forever. Not giving a piece of land to somebody for 20 million, he says it, puts money in his pocket. Where he says it to the DO or to you or to me, he puts the money in his pocket. He finishes drinking beer or the marrying woman, he dies, and that's the end of it. His own grandchildren will have nothing to benefit from the land. So I think in summary, that is what the Barkwere Land claim, the Barkwere Land grab is all about. I will remain available to answer further questions.
That's incredible. What I hear here about all these stories. I'm coming to you, Barrister Afro.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Go
ahead.
Under the English law,
What's incredible? What
continuous
I hear here about
continuous occupation of land for more than 10 years is enough proof for you to be given certificate of occupancy when you apply, as long as you meet the conditions. And the conditions are not difficult. That was English law. Under this Land Tenures Act, there is nothing like continuous occupation of land. All they want to know is if you bought it from the natives that occupy that land, or you bought it from the government, or you bought it from a third party that had bought it from somebody, and so on and so forth. And I think that Barrister Mbesa has gone into the depth of the land grabbing issue and included nomadic people who came along with their cows and started grazing on what Cameroon calls national lands, the hills that were unoccupied, and they have enough pasture for their cattle. And in doing that, they infringe on people's farms, natives' farms, and so on, and created what we call now land disputes. We have to be very, very careful to differentiate between land disputes and land grabbing. The land dispute is a dispute between private individuals or villages or settlements that are fighting with each other on where their boundaries are and where they are not, and so on and so forth. And most of those cases result in some kind of a fight, a conflict, and people lost their lives. That is different from land grabbing that I think we are talking about. We're talking about
Okay.
people who have acquired land that did not belong to them. We're talking about foreigners, particularly La République du Cameroon citizens, who have come into our territory and acquired land under dubious means. Whether these lands are state lands or national lands as defined by the Land Tenure Act is immaterial. It is still land grabbing. I want to say that before 1974, when Ahidjo came up with the ordinance, there was the Land Tenures Act of 1968 that was abrogated, and that 1974 law or ordinance was signed by Ahidjo, was promulgated, was voted by the parliament and signed by Ahidjo under what you call United Republic of Cameroon. So what I'm trying to say is that when we arrive Buea, we will put every occupant or every owner of land that is not Ambazonia first into question. And you prove to us how you acquired that land originally.
Okay, Barrister, thank you very much.
That is the way I understand about land grabbing.
Hello, Barrister.
There's a difference between land disputes and land grabbing.
Barrister, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry I was to coordinate, but I came in when Barrister was talking. When you finished, Barrister Mbeseha took over. We know that Dr. Tom has not yet spoken, but I have some questions for the two of you as concerns the topic of today. But before I go on, we want to give this chance to Dr. Tom to tell us something on the rule of see something, say something. Then before we get into the question of our land grabbing and the history of the land that Barrister Mbeseha has just spoken. Over to you, Dr. Tom.
Thank you very much, Pastor Commando. And thanks to our two heavyweight barristers, Mbeseha and Fru Johnson, for those eye-opening information about land grabbing in Ambazonia. You see, when a nation is so corrupt and so unethical and cannot even respect its own laws, then such things happen. Because in La République Constitution, what the barristers told us, those were government lands. They were still being sold by those corrupt government officials to other non-Ambazonian people who now claim ownership of that land. So even their own constitution, their own laws, they could not respect because of the unethical, the lack of ethics, or whatever, in all of their dealings there. And the land that belonged to our people from generations untold, those lands are taken, are grabbed by them in the guise of installing artificial chiefs, and then in turn giving them that land and taking it back from them, of course, with their own conniving. And as we see, nothing can be done to our land without the conniving of our own people. Greed, the want for money, the want for power leads them to do such things. And such things are very unethical. And the Ethics Commission is there to see to it that things move on smoothly in the government amongst our people, that there be accountability, transparency and that personal responsibility be taken up when things go wrong and people are called out to answer for it. And that's exactly what we are going to do when we reach Ambazonia. So with this year of acceleration now, we are hoping and working towards it that should happen. Our independence that has already been restored should be granted to us by the United Nations as fast as possible so that we can make such things happen back home. So last year, the Ethics Commission was raising awareness about unethical issues, raising awareness about ethical behavior and ethical issues. This year, starting with land grabbing, the awareness is now being raised about unethical things that have been embedded into our culture. Because, mind you, many of our people profit from it. Some of our people who connive with the enemy, the top CPDM brass, everywhere in my own village, Babungo there is this Dan Polo guy who grazes on land given to him and infringes upon the rights of my people, the land given to them, and takes over the water supply that was put in place through hard labor by my people, and uses that to water his cattle. And of course, nothing is being done because he belongs to those who are up there in power. In the future, Ambazonia, nobody will be above the law, no single person, no matter who you are, what title you have, and how rich you are and how influential you are. The poorest person will have the right. The poorest person who has nothing, who lives on the street, will have the right to take any other person to court without having this without him being rich and influential and all that, like is the case in Ambazonia today. Our ethical code of conduct will see to that. So Ambazonians should rest assured. The ethical code is there and is being implemented in all the departments of government. There is especially the Department of Town Planning, Economy, Investment, Resources, which will see to it that such things as happened today in Ambazonia under La Republique occupational rule will never happen in a free Ambazonia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tom. I will switch over now to Barrister Timothy and Barrister John Frunso to ask them some few questions. Please, I'll just go ahead and ask the few questions I have here. And let's bear in mind that we'll have just 24 minutes to be on this program because another program is coming up. So the first question I'm asking is, when we are talking of land, who actually owns the land? And if we know who are the owners of the land that we are talking about, then the next question will be, what is the difference between native land and government land? And how did government come about getting that land? Because if from what I understood when Barrister Fu was talking, he talked extensively on the natives getting the land, and in those days of southern Cameroons, there were the native authorities until La Republic came in with some of these appellations that we are almost getting confused to them. Then the last question will be the land, CDC land, how was it gotten? to get into, because I know that the CDC land was created for cash crop farming and also for employment for the people at that time when it was Commonwealth Development Corporation, if I'm not mistaken. So these are my few questions. Would like Barrister Fruit to go ahead and first give us, and then Barrister Tim will run up.
Well, before our so-called joining, all lands belong to the Queen of British Empire. But
Okay.
there was this principle of private lands, native lands, and 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 so on. One of the things that we lawyers, when we'll be drafting the land tenure, the land law for Ambazonia, would take into cognizance would be to define who owns the land, the various types of land that will exist in the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. So your first question about who owns the land, I would just give you what happened when we were under the colonial masters.
Right.
But La Republique came in and now own all the land, calling some state lands and national lands. And then they will tell you how you can acquire national lands and how you can acquire state lands. That is the present principle that exists in La République du Cameroon, meaning that La République du Cameroon owns all lands. Then you are allowed to own to occupy some to occupy and ask for a land title for a part of the national lands. If you want
Even
to
the land where
acquire,
Papa believe and for you.
yes, you will have to ask for a title for it. I'm sitting here, I'm a successor of my father, and I have a lot of land, and I've not been able to immatriculate even one because of, as I described, the hurdles involved in obtaining a land title. So presently, La Republique owns all lands, and they classify them like national lands and state lands. That is the general principle, which is at variance with our colonial masters. Even though the general principle during the colonial day was that the Queen owns all the land, but there is this part one of that, and part two is that one, they are private lands and they are native lands, number two, owned by the settlers and villagers of wherever that land is located. That is why when the Cameroon Commonwealth Development Corporation came, they actually negotiated with the Bakwiri chiefs and the Balong chiefs to acquire land to plant the plantations of the Commonwealth Development Corporation. They did not just grab, they met with the traditional authorities and explained to them the reason why these plantations are important for the survival of the local population, and that the Queen would like to take some of this land and put plantations that will employ people, that will feed people, that will be beneficial to the local population. That is the way I understand about how CDC got land to implant their plantations. And normally when CDC does not need that land returns to the natives. That is what was supposed to be. But La Republique has made it in such a way that when CDC returns the land, the administrative authorities get what is theirs, what they like, and then like Barrister Mbesa said, they created chiefs and divided those lands to those chiefs so that those chiefs can also sell to people. And the highest buyers are always francophones. If they don't have opportunity to grab, they go and buy from those chiefs and acquire it for themselves. And that is a subtle land grabbing principle that is taking place as we speak.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So number 2 question, how was CDC land gotten? I just explained that. Thank you.
That was actually a question for Barrister Beseha, because he talked on the CDC lands. But you have answered. Let him go ahead and still add something.
Yes, you've asked who are the owners of land. Before you answer that question, you must remember, we must go back to history. Before the arrival of the Western people, the white man, there was nothing called central government anywhere in Africa. There was nothing like that. The Bafu people owned some land, they were farming there. The Bali people, the Banso, that was not a national government. So those natives just worked there. Once the idea of a centralized government came in, when the colonial master came and established something called Cameroon, there was nothing called Cameroon. They were the Bassas, they were the Bafo, they were the Bansos, there was nothing called Cameroon. Once they established some 4 corners of a piece of land called Cameroon, they instituted a centralized type of government that will rule over the Bafut, the Bassas, the Mogamos, everybody within that periphery of the territory. And that's why if you were here, I said that the lands that were taken in Fako for private use, they went and registered them in Germany under the Grundbuch, the German register. There was no Ministry of Lands in Buya. There was no government there. So they registered those things there. The lands originally belonged to the people. But once the central government came in, a structure called central government, the whole idea of land ownership changed. Maybe you will remember that as of 1961, we had only 6 divisions in the whole of Ambazonia. Victoria, Kumba, Mamfe, Bamenda, Wum, Nkambe, and whichever. Those were the only 6 divisions. And those 6 divisions had government structures. They had government offices where they had put up a district office, they had put up a hospital. That place became government land. So government tried to put rules to organize the whole landed property within its own area of jurisdiction called Cameroon under the Germans and Southern Cameroon under the British. And so that's the structure under which we can describe it. Back to your question, the CDC lands. I had said earlier, our problem with land grab is the CDC lands. How did they get these lands? How did the CDC get the lands? I had explained that the original CDC was established on the lands that were owned by the Germans, on which they grew crops. Those lands were given to them by the Bakwarians. I don't know where they took and they paid for it, but they gave it to them. And they went and registered the lands in Germany, the German land register. So after the Second World War, when they left, those official lands reverted to the new administrators, that's the UK administration. And so what were they to do with it? They decided to form the CDC, to develop it for the common use of the population. Fast forward, in 1974, when Ahidjo was passing his land ordinance, those particular lands on which the CDC was growing crops, the lands that were given to the Germans, were excluded from being national lands. they were described as private property of the people in Article 2 of the 1974 Ordinance. The lands under the Grunge Branch, Article 70, Ordinance 74, Article 2E, were private lands. And so, if they were private lands, it means that they were lands that belonged to the Bakweri people. Because they were private. The government did not say that was their land. No, the government described national land there, hospitals, ocean beaches. They didn't say those lands of the CDC were government land. They said they were private lands. And that was why I explained that was the cause of the cases by the Bakweri Land Commission, which ended where I've explained. But what happened? To be fast forward, somebody mentioned Dampulo. The CDC was meant to serve the public. The Bakweri people are not problem with that. But when they started privatizing it means becomes personal. Among the people who bought the CDC property, among them is Dampulo. Dampulo purportedly bought all the tea estates. That is Tole, that's Jutisa, that's Ndu. And last week I saw them somewhere on African News. Dampulo was rated the second richest man in Cameroon from the sale of tea.
No, the first.
And so when they sold, for example, Tole tea to Dampulo for a symbolic 1 franc, they didn't take any money. For a symbolic 1 franc, this is important. Because Tole is no longer a tea estate today. Tole is in the center of Buea. The tea was grown on land. Those Tole tea estates that were grown on land, that land on which tea was growing, has become plots to build houses. Who is going to sell them? Dampulo, not the Bakweri natives. He's going to sell them and put money in his pocket. He's not going to give it to the government to save the government in schools, in hospitals. No. And so that is the core of the land grab. Would I be laboring the point of making so much history? No. Even there's always government. The certificates of occupancy, which President Saul mentioned, they were not signed by the funds. They were not signed by the chiefs. Certificates of occupancy were signed by the government. They gave you a certificate that you are occupying this piece of land. In Buea, under the government of Indira and Foncha, was the Department of Lands and Surveys. There was a director of the Lands and Surveys called Mr. Njika, who oversaw this. They gave lands certificates of occupancy. They could create a layout, and they created layouts. For example, they created a layout in Buea. Government created layout. These were people's places they took from them, and created government layout to facilitate people to settle. They portioned out plots. But Mr. Njika Baberikema was the director of the Lands and Surveys, started abusing it by giving most of the plots in Great Support. I lived in Street 7, so I know what I'm talking about, to his country people. He abused the whole nonsense. But the government did not go silent. The government appointed a commission of inquiry headed by Oliver Inglis to investigate into the wrongful assignment of plots by Mr. Njika to his brothers and sisters. And it was investigated. So, Pastor Commando, originally most of those lands belonged to the people. But when they came to a centralized government called Cameroon, government started assuming control, among which taking pieces of land to put schools, putting pieces of land to build hospitals, putting pieces of land for settlement. Like if you go to buy something they call the class quarters. I think it's something in Bamanda. And so government has to make control of it. What we are here is the abuse of government authority over the use of land. If the CDC was no longer serving the purpose of saving the people, selling the tea or whatever thing they had, and the lands had to go back, they had to go back to the people, the Bakweri people. These are the people who
the natives.
The natives.
Right.
For your information, if you go to that place they call University of Buea, that was a CDC plantation. Are the Bakweri people against the building of a university on that place? No, they are not asking that they should take away the university and put Bakweri people there. No, they are not saying that. I've explained that they started this their action, which has brought it to this land grab, after the 1994 decree saying that they will privatize the CDC. This was if you are privatizing it, they didn't even know to whom they were going to sell. You have sold it now to Dampolo, it becomes his property. It's no longer Bakwete property. He can sell a plot for $1 billion. He can sell a plot for nothing. He can give you one for free. The chief of Long Street, small support, who lives next door, cannot do anything. That was probably Islam. And so on and so forth. That's the origin of land grab. I wonder if I've answered your question. Once you have centralized government,
Yes, definitely.
colonial
You have
government,
done.
control.
Pastor Commando.
Our time is actually up. Our time is actually
Yeah,
up.
but
And we must get out of
let me
here
quickly
now.
say the case, a live case, before we go, concerning Dampolo. When La Republique took over our territory, they considered CDC and all of CDC is property. So when Nibangu was retiring as Minister of Agriculture, La Republique gave Nibangu all the tea estates and the tea that was in stock. In the attempt to privatize the tea, they gave it first as a gift on retirement to Mr. Nibangu, that we all know. He's a Bafuchu stroke Bafut man. The mother is from Bafut, the father is from Bafuchu. The minister, was a minister of agriculture before he retired, and Paul Biya gave him all the tea. What did this man do? Because Paul Biya didn't just give him, he said, look, all I'm asking for you is to pay to the government treasury 2.5 billion francs CFA. Nibangu did not have that money. Instead of, if he was wise enough, he would have negotiated with the banks to get that money, and he would have owned all of the tea. What did he do? He called on Dampolo. Dampolo said, oh, I will take it over. I will give you 5% of everything. You don't need to do anything. All this was verbal. Nibangu did not take the opportunity to put anything in writing. I'm talking about a live case that my late colleague did when I was practicing law in the southern zone, in Fako and Meme, and led Bonu Innocent, a lawyer in the southwest then, was representing Mr. Nibangu in this case against Dampolo. So when Dampolo paid that 2.5 billion, the land, all the tea was now given to him by the government at the instructions of Mr. Nibangu. Now, when it came to time for Nibangu to get the fruits of his labor, the 5% that Dampolo promised him, Dampolo said, I don't owe you anything. I bought the tea and the land from the government for 2.5 million. That case was in Boya High Court, and Nibangu lost both in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal, and in the Supreme Court, and that ended the thing. Dampolo got everything. Dampolo now will tell you that is a case that is on file that I want to bring it to our attention. Thank you. And that is a subtle way of grabbing land, because he deceived Nibangu, took that land, and the rest, and we know what happened. He lost. I mean, Nibangu lost both in the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. And he died.
Okay.
He died very quickly because of that case.
Let me just add one word, just one word, for the listeners to remember that John Nibangu was the first Cameroon general manager of the CDC.
Correct.
Prior to that, he was the first Ambazonian accountant of the CDC. So he knew it very well. He knew the value of the product. But why did he leave? He left and became Minister of Agriculture because of the Bakure land claim. The government wanted a Bakure guy to be in charge of the CDC. That's why they brought Mosonge to help them defeat the Bakure land claim, and then they removed Johnny Babu. That's just information. John Ngwabu knew everything about the CDC. After having been, he was the first Cameroonian general manager of that thing. So he knew the value. They were compensating him for his good work, for being silent over their theft. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrister
Dr.
Dr. Tom. Yeah, just give us the closing remarks, and then we call it quit for today. We shall be coming back to actually treat these thieves and tell Ambazonia where we are standing, because we have begun. This is just part one. We will go ahead. Dr. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, fellow Ambazonians. Thank you to our great panelists. Just want Ambazonians to know that in April 1961, 64 nations out of 23 voted that on 1st October 1961, independence will be granted to Ambazonia. That independence was never ratified, but still granted, and we restored that independence on 1st October 2017. So everything that is in Ambazonia, the land, the resources, the air, the water, the plants, the animals, they belong to us. And no amount of land grabbing and crooked policies by La Republique will change that. So in a free Ambazonia, all of that will be restructured and all the land will be returned to their rightful owners, and they being Ambazonians, who will then have the right to sell those lands to whom they choose at a fair price. Thank you.
Okay, fellow Ambazonians, on that note, we want to call it quit for today. Thanking you so much, Barrister Tim. Thank you so much, Barrister Fro. And thanking you, Dr. Tom, letting you all know that Ambazonia is free, and we will get back to the law that guided us before the incursion of La République du Cameroon in 1961, forcefully and with all games. All right. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
From the savannah to the Midland and the Atlantic, Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. Ambazonia rise.
Dear Ambazonians on the home front and diaspora.
Dear Ambazonia freedom fighters in the home front and in the diaspora.
The Ethics Commission of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia is coming out to alert you that it is becoming more and more evident that the former British Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonians, will soon emerge as the newest nation in the world.
We are calling on all of us to start preparing to receive Ambazonia as parents prepare to receive their firstborn child. Malcolm X said, tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. We are already very educated, talented, and very rich in natural resources. Do all this guarantee a safe and prosperous Ambazonia? The answer is an emphatic no. Theodore Roosevelt said, to educate a person in the mind but not in morals is to educate a menace in society.
Ambazonians, it is time to start planning to restore our cultural and social values that characterize us as a people of good repute. Before our Republic to Cameroon invasion, we were respectful of each other, of the law, and of our culture. We earned our living through honest hard work, making clean money for ourselves.
Our values helped us to maximize the benefits of our natural resources as well as our human resources. Southern Cameroons were serene and clean, simply beautiful in spirit and in the physical. We all long for such a place to call home, and we can make it happen by God's grace.
Our local government areas and counties, are you preparing? Do you have an ethics commission in your local government areas, counties to serve as a moral compass for you? Do you have a copy of the Ambazonia Ethics Code and the Constitution?
All arms of government, do you have an ethics agency? Departments of DSS, HSS, Communications and IT, Education, DHACM, DFA and DEINR. Do you have ethics agency to serve as a moral compass for your departments?
Ambazonians, you need to know your rights by reading the Ethics Code and the Constitution.
Shame unethical behavior and reward good behavior in your communities. Hold leaders accountable. Be the watchdog of your communities and governments. See something, say something.
The church, you are the main research center of moral principles with the responsibility of moralizing the society. How effective are you outside the church building?
Maya Angelou said, when you know better, then you do better. Ambazonians watch ethics for an emerging Ambazonia every Friday at 4 p.m. Amber time.
Thank you, Bobo. Oh my God. Just to remind the Ambazonians that tomorrow we are getting on to the federal draft, and this federal draft is calling on everybody to be on the podium so we can contribute to the federal government of Ambazonia and push the enablers and push La Republique out of our land. The President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, Dr. Samuel Ekome Sako, shall be present at the federal draft tomorrow, the 25th of February 2023. Don't miss this wonderful opportunity to be blessed and to be a blessing and fight for the people of Ambazonia. God bless you and have a wonderful day.